All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to SaberSim's DFS Office Hours. My name is Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim. It is Tuesday, May 3rd of 2022. Thanks for tuning into the stream here today. If this is your first time watching Office Hours, this is an open Q&A style show. I answer questions that come in through YouTube chat and through our Office Hours channel in Slack about SaberSim, about DFS, really whatever you guys want to talk about. Sometimes on days like yesterday, we go down a exploitative versus balanced strategy rabbit hole, which was kind of fun. If you missed that, that is towards the end of yesterday's stream, which is up on YouTube. But for the most part, we kind of stick to the schedule here, answer the questions in the order that they come in here. So feel free to fire away if you have any questions for today's show. I actually only have one in the queue at the moment about spreading out exposure in your baseball lineups, particularly for hitters. So we'll talk a little bit about the value of spreading out your risk that way, and also some of the best ways to do that on SaberSim. I do think some of the tools that we have at the moment are a little limited. I think there's some things we want to do there. So we'll talk a little bit about that here. But if you have questions, that's the only one I've got in my queue today. So go ahead and fire away if you've got them for now. If you are by chance watching this video as a recording on YouTube, I'm glad you made it here as well. There will be a time-stamped list of all the questions we cover in this stream here in the description of the video. So if you want to bounce around, if you want to look for the particular question or section that you're interested in, you can do that there. There's also a link to join the Slack community in the description of every past Office Hours video. So definitely join up. You'll get access to our community. You'll get access to the Office Hours channel, which is where I always try to prioritize questions I'm answering first. And you'll get access to our free bets of the day. So a lot of awesome stuff going on in the Slack community. But anyway, we'll go ahead and jump right in here today. Had a decent night of DFS last night, to be honest. It wasn't too bad. I was well over the field on Diamondback stacks. My biggest leverage stand on pitchers overall was on Pablo Lopez, who still ended up with like 7 strikeouts, actually like not even the worst fantasy day out there, but it put me onto a lot of Diamondback stacks, which worked out pretty good. I unfortunately had more Mariners stacks than any other team, so that wasn't great, but I had just enough Rays and Diamondback stacks and a couple of the right like Yankees and Astros one-offs that I was able to string together a decent night, a profitable night. So we like to see those. But anyway, let's go ahead. Let's get into our first question here. And this is from Joe Mayo here. And it's about exposures for hitters. So let's talk about this. He said, what is the best way to handle exposures in MLB? I like the exposures I see when I run a research build, but those exposures are too restrictive when running actual sims. To set exposures, I've been running a research build. I've been running research build exposures and adding 10% to them so the builder will run. I usually leave the pitchers uncapped and then hand adjust them in step 3. Is this an acceptable process? Is there other ways I should be handling exposures? I've had success in the past using a shotgun approach with Fantasy Cruncher, in which I would set the max hitter exposure at 15 to 20% and set a stacking rule 4 to 3 on FanDuel and 5 2 on DK with the goal of being spread out your exposures more. Switch to SaberSim because I'm sold on your methodology, but I'm not sure if I have a solid process for setting ownership on hitters. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're describing here is actually a pretty strong approach. This is going to lead you to playing a very balanced strategy, right? You're running a research build, right? So you're running this 0-0-10 build, and approximating the percent chance that a player shows up in the optimal lineup, right? That's what this kind of build does. So let's mention that here first for people that maybe are unfamiliar here watching along, right? We can run these builds on SaberSim where you turn correlation off, ownership fade off, you turn sim variance to 10, so you're using a single game simulation for every game on the slate, and you're simming the slate essentially 1,500 times, right? What Joe's saying he's doing here is he's taking his exposures that he's getting in this 1,500 slate simulation sample, adding 10% or so to that, and then setting that as his max exposure for each individual player. And that's a pretty decent approach, right? That's basically going to be a perfectly balanced approach. If those numbers are correct, if the percent chance of being in the optimal are correct here in step 3, you're going to build lineups that make you essentially unexploitable. You are perfectly matching the field on every single player here. So personally, I like to attempt to exploit the field a little bit more. I'm not as keyed into specifically trying to play the perfect optimal exposure to every single player. I am more than happy being over the field on a player where I am feel like the field is under on him, but I think this approach makes sense, and I do like to be very spread out with my hitting exposure. So now that this build is done, I can kind of show you again here what we're talking about, right? So the idea would be basically saying you're going to set each individual player's exposure here to 10% or so, 10% plus whatever they're showing up in here in this build. So basically, you would be most exposed to any one batter only in 20% of your lineups or something like that, right? That's what would happen here. So that's perfectly fine. A couple notes on this. So that I would say from a theory standpoint, I like this approach. I have no problems with this, right? I like to play a little more exploitatively. I wouldn't talk you out of this, so I'm fine with this. In terms of how to go about doing this, I think there's a couple different options, and I'm going to give you options in increasing time investment, right? I'm going to give you the shortest time investment first, and then increase the time investment here. So I think the shortest time investment possible is to rely on the sim variance slider, right? And to basically say, I want to diversify as much as possible. If you only want 20% max exposure to any one hitter, I think you are kind of implying that you want to be pretty diversified. And what I would say is don't even worry about setting any min or max exposures. Just crank your sim variance up. There are definitely slates. There are actually many slates where I'll even be comfortable going up all the way to something like 10. If you are going to set your sim variance slider very high because you are just using single game sims at that point, I recommend doing a couple things to kind of protect yourself against getting a little bit wonkier lineups in there. So if you have a certain expectation of any stack rules you want or anything like that, set that here, right? Maybe make sure that min salary is set at a number that you're actually comfortable with, whatever that is, and set your pool size equal to 1,500, right? So that you can reduce the risk of kind of sub-sampling the entire sample of sims by having a really high sim variance and a very low sample size, right? You can run into an issue there. So make your pool size as big as possible. But when you build this, I think you'll actually find that you'll get pretty diversified right out of the gate. So let's take a look at this. This is an 11-game slate with sim variance at 10. And I think you'll find that your batting exposures are already probably pretty diversified. I guess the one thing I should have noted is that if you really want to play just a truly balanced build, it may also make sense for you to turn down your ownership fade slider a little bit, right? By playing super balanced and basically just trying to match the optimal rate of each player in the field or each player in the player pool. I think it does make sense to turn down your ownership fade a little bit, but for the purposes of demoing this build will still work fine. And we'll give this a moment to finish, but I just want to see what these exposures look like here. And I think, again, this is not going to get you exactly what you're looking for. If you have a very precise idea of what you want your exposures to be, I think you'll need to do the. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I got distracted here. You'll need to do a method that gives you a little bit more control here. So, but looks like we've got a few people in the chat here. Brad, HC, Guy Will Gamble, Chris, welcome everybody. Welcome. All right, cool. So this is complete now. Let's take a look and see what the... So, I mean, you can see right out of the gate, right? We're getting 20% max exposure to any one hitter already. So this kind of, if that was your goal, you've kind of reached that. And you can do whatever you want. You probably want to do some stack work here to clean up your stacks, right? Because at sim variance 10, you're going to get a wider variety of stack types. But you'll see, just doing that alone, you're also going to be pretty diversified on your pitchers as a result of that. So if you want to tighten up your pitching pool, you can do that here as well. But I wanted to show this that, the simplest and least time intensive way of diversifying your pool even more is just increasing your sim variance slider. But let's say you don't want to do that, right? So let's say You don't want to increase the sim variance slider. You want to use the standard sim variance slider, but you want to still match your exposures, right? So maybe you want 20% exposure to all the batters in the field, right? That at the moment, there is not a very easy way to go ahead and set your maximum exposure to everybody, all batters at once, like all. There is this max exposure, right? The max exposure in the build settings where you can come in here and say, don't give me more than 30% of any one player or something like that. But this will apply to everybody, including pitchers. So if you want to do this only to batters, what I actually think is the easiest thing to do is to download the CSV. And then what I'll do is quickly stop that screen and pull up the Excel screen. And then pull this up, right? This will be the CSV that gets downloaded here. And then what I would recommend doing here, and this requires just a little bit of Excel work here, but you can sort this column and basically find where all the pitchers are. So we'll go to the pitchers, and then we can basically start with the first pitcher and go to the last pitcher. And we'll just eliminate these guys so we don't accidentally set a max exposure to our pitcher. Right? And there's a lot of them, right? A lot of pitchers in the pool with all the relief pitchers and things like that. So we'll just delete it. And then all we really care about here is max exposure, right? So what I'm going to do is just delete some of these other columns to clean this up here. And we could basically come over here. Let's just keep the max and min exposures and delete just the other stuff we don't need. And now, if you wanted to set a max exposure to every hitter, right? Maybe it's 20%. You can do this and just drop this all the way down, right? And then save this here. As a new file. And I kept the min exposures there. You don't really need to do that, really. But then we can upload this, right? Oops. Let me pull back SaberSim. Okay. Okay, and then you can upload this, right? Oops. And give this a second to upload. Looks like it finds a couple duplicates. We'll just ignore those here. But now, oh wait, what did I do? Oh, those are the pitchers. Now all of our batters will have a 20% max exposure. So a little bit like tedious, and I think our goal is to just add something in the future so that you could just say set a max exposure, but only for hitters. But that is a way that I don't think is not too time intensive. A little more time intensive than just turning up the sim variance slider, right? But that would be another way. And then it will just make sure, right? Even if you wanted to come in here and run a build now on the original sim variance, right? You're only going to get 20% to any one batter. Now, I think the kind of the final way of doing this, and maybe the most extreme way of doing this, would be saying, Jordan, I don't want somewhere between 0 and 20% exposure to every batter in the pool, right? I want plus or minus 10% of their optimal rate for every batter in the pool, right? So for the case of, Juan Soto, who was the best projected hitter in that research build we did, we want 0 to 20%. But maybe for another batter, we're only comfortable up to 15%. And for another, we're only comfortable up to 14% or something like that, right? If you have individual per hitter requirements, what you will need to do then at that point is you will need to download your research build and use an Excel count if function for your exposures, right? And basically recalculate your exposure to each hitter you have in that spreadsheet. And then you can set the min and max exposure to like plus or minus. Actually, you know what? Let's just demo this because I don't think I've actually gone through the process of ever truly demoing this for people. So let's just do it since we have time today. So here's what you would actually do. So this is our research build, right? So actually what we need first is we need the what am I saying? We need the I feel a little foggy today, I guess, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but my mind's getting away from me here. So okay, so we have the downloaded projections, right? Man, it's annoying that I can't just like easily share. Can I share two screens? I can't share two screens. Okay, that's fine. Let's pull SaberSim back up. Okay, so we have the downloaded projections. Let's go over to our research build here, and then we're going to download this one as well. So these are our lineups from our research build. So we'll make 2 adjustments so we can download this. And for those of you watching maybe that are somewhat new to SaberSim, I should say this here. You know, the first 2 methods that I described are going to be a little easier. So if you're new to the tools and you're just trying to find out a way to diversify your hitting exposures a little bit more, I would increase your sim variance slider, or I would set some max exposures up front and probably stop there. This, I think, is a little bit more of kind of maybe of an advanced way to get your exposures on a per batter level the exact way you want. So let's now go ahead and reshare Excel. So this is the way I actually do this in my process here. So we'll get this pulled up. So this is that spreadsheet. And then what I do is I will create another sheet and copy over all of the lineups, right? And put them into that sheet. And then what you can do is create a column, or however you want to do this. There's a variety of different ways you can do this here. But you can calculate exposure, right? And the way you're calculating the exposure, let me make this a little bigger too. Oh, I can't make this bigger. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see okay. That makes it a little better. Let's do that. Okay. So then what we're going to do is equals count if. And we're going to count the lineup range for every instance of that ID, and then divide by 1,500. And that will basically back out your exposure, in this case, our percent chance to be optimal of every player in the pool. So I've talked about this at times. I've hinted at this. I've never actually done it on stream. So hopefully that will be kind of helpful. So very cool way to just basically, you know, and there's a variety of ways to do this. There are ways to make this more. Obviously, the way I did this was downloaded the projections and downloaded the lineups. There's ways to make this a little more permanent so that you don't have to do all of that every time. But pretty cool way of doing that. So now what you would want to do, and actually maybe we should just move this column over here, right? Insert cut. Yeah. Okay. So now we could come up with minimum and maximum exposures. And again, maybe it's only for pitchers, right? So or maybe not for pitchers, right? So let's X out the pitchers, right? So kind of doing some Excel stuff here on stream today, but that's okay. That's fun. So now maybe you want to do plus or minus 10%, right? So we could do minimum exposure is, let's do 100 times, because I want a whole number, right? 100 times that minus 10. We're going to get a negative number here. I don't know. I don't think SaberSim will like negative numbers if I think about it. So you may need to do something like, this is kind of getting to, I don't want to spend a whole day doing an Excel tutorial. You might want to do something here that basically says, like, if this number is less than 0, then the number is 0. Otherwise, use the number. The max exposure would be equals this number times 100 plus 10, right? And then you could actually go in and basically get your min and max exposures for exactly every player that you wanted, right? So actually, you know what? Forget it. Let's just do it because I know how to do this pretty quickly. So we'll say if this number is less than 0, then it's 0. Otherwise, it's that number. Okay. So then you could go in here and go like that. And we're in business. You'd now have max exposures for basically every player in the pool. So, you know, you could do this. Let's move this back over here. Oh. Okay, now actually let's just do this. Okay, it's not going to like that. Now, basically, you would want to, you know, upload this. There you go. So, Guy Will Gamble said use max formula to lose those negatives. Yeah, that would work too. That works as well. Yeah, a lot of different ways to skin a cat here in terms of once you get your hands dirty with Excel. But and this is actually this resembles something that I end up doing pretty regularly. I don't mess with these min and max exposures in terms of pre-build uploaded exposures very much. I do a little bit more with editing projections. At least recently, I've messed with the min and max exposures quite a bit in the past. At the moment, I'm I'm preferring to edit the projections a little bit more than the exposures, but nothing wrong with either. So again, so like let's get back to the original question here. I will say real quick, Brad said, is there a free version of Excel? You can use Google Sheets. I think my monthly subscription to Microsoft Office is only $6 a month. So I kind of swear by the Microsoft Office stuff. I like Excel. So I like having it local as well. I don't like being at the whims of the internet connection, especially when it's close to lock. So anyway, let's wrap up this question here. So again, talking about editing your exposures, I love the idea of playing very diversified when it comes to hitting exposures, especially if you're building 150. I am likely to be pretty diversified on my hitting exposures. Plus or minus 10 or 15% of whatever I'm getting in my research build is probably where I'll end up to my highest exposed hitter on the slate. I think the simplest way to do that and the least time-intensive way to do that is to turn up your sim variance setting. If you turn up your sim variance setting, I would make sure, well, and also for you specifically, Joe, I would say if you want to play in a less exploitative, more balanced approach, I think it also makes sense to turn down your ownership fade. If you're going to turn up your sim variance setting, an important thing to note is that because that will increase the range of outcomes of each lineup, right? That will increase the diversity of each lineup. You should make sure that you've set other things here the way you want them, right? Like if you set min salary low, or if you turn min salary really low, you will get very low salary lineups when sim variance is at very high levels. You will get less nice looking stacks out of the gate because of how high that variance is. So you should set a couple rules there if you want to get those lineups the better way you want, but that's the simplest way to do it. The middle outcome, I think here, the median option would be to just download the player pool and set a max exposure to all your hitters at once, 20, 30%, whatever you want. And then the more extreme option would be to individually download your research build, right? Rebuild your research build in Excel, and then calculate your individual exposures to each player using a COUNTIF function. So a couple different options there. But what do you guys think about this view, by the way? Is this better or worse? You see how I'm over in the corner here? So this is how I normally do this. Oh, that's not it. This is how I normally do it, right? Do you guys like this one more, where I'm off to the side? Or do you like this one where I'm down in the corner? Curious what looks better. I think this makes it look a little bit bigger, but a little bit more of the screen's covered up. So let me know. But yeah, maybe we'll leave it like this for a little bit. See what we think. So, all right, cool. Let me go ahead and jump over. Okay, so we have some questions in Slack. So let's hit some of these. Larson has a question here. And he said, if I wanted to keep a hand-built lineup as a part of a 20 max or something larger, how can I run the sims, upload the file, and keep my hand-built lineup? I know I can go into the app and change one of my lineups by hand, but I will lose the ability to run the sim for late swap if I want down the road. Yeah. So this is one of those things. At the moment, there's not really a good way to, within a given contest, say, don't late swap that lineup, right? Like what you can do, and I've talked about this plenty, you can go in here and basically say, I'm going to late swap, but don't late swap this because I hand built it and I liked it. That's just as easy as unchecking it, right? That's not very hard. It is much harder in, if I have 15 lineups in the mini-max to say I want to late swap 14 of them and leave the other one the same. So if you want to do that, I know this is not the ideal answer, but Larson, what I would probably recommend is you probably just removing that lineup from your entries file. And that's probably the easiest approach. If you maintain that kind of same entries file throughout the night within SaberSim, you won't ever have to do that more than once. But I think your best option, if you have like a 20 max, one of those lineups is hand built, you don't want to touch it, you should just X that out from your entries file. And what that would actually look like here, what I mean by that is a lot of Excel today. Let's get Excel going again here. So you would have your entries file. So that's not it. It's annoying. I wish, so we use StreamYard to do these, and maybe just by chance, one of you guys is a StreamYard employee here, so I'm going to share this. I wish I could have like multiple windows set up to share that I could switch between. I have to like totally stop a screen share every time I want to share. Anyway, what I was saying, so like, let's say you wanted to swap everything but that base hit, right? You could just remove it like this, shift it up, and then save this as the file and use this as your entries file. And that would probably be the easiest thing to do. I guess the base hit's a bad example because it's easy to do within SaberSim. Like if you have one mini max lineup, right? But you'll want to make sure to select these particular cells because if you start deleting this information over here, I think you can run into issues, I think. So, like that's what I'm referring to. Would be like deleting that. So, Guy Will Gamble says you might be able to set that with different scenes in StreamYard. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. So Brad asked what am I using to stream? Yeah, we use StreamYard. So I have like on the bottom I can control my different views and I can control the different windows that I'm screen sharing, but it will only let me screen share one. So like right now I had to stop the screen share to pull that down, and then I'll add in SaberSim back up. And now we're good. It doesn't take too much time, but it's a little annoying when you're trying to do everything. So anyway, Larson, I apologize that that's the easiest way to do that at the moment. But that is the easiest way to do that at the moment. So, but Eagles asked a question. Oops. And he said, how do I know my stack could be the optimal lineup / smash on the app? Good question, right? So I'll say, let me say this first. So there are, there's a lot of tools out there like boom bust tools and smash percentages and things like that, right? That some of our competitors have out there. And I think those can be very useful. And I'll show actually the way here. Probably many of you watching already know what I'm going to say, but I'll show that in a moment of how we can actually calculate that. But I want to first basically say that like the reason those things exist in the first place is because the alternative on a lot of tools is just building cash lineups, right? Like if you can't ask a traditional optimizer, what is the percent, what is a good 20 max lineup or what's a good single entry lineup for tonight's slate, right? You have to tell the optimizer, these are the settings to use. Now build the lineups, right? Well, SaberSim is a little bit different that because we have our simulation data, we have our simulation data, we have our correlation data, and we have an understanding of how much to weight the different components of upside for a different contest, correlation and ownership and variance. When you are getting a team in your lineups, right? That is already kind of a vote of confidence from SaberSim itself that that team or stack is viable for that particular contest. So I don't want to say that SaberSim can just be blindly trusted because it can't really, right? It's not like a pure money printer operation or anything like that. There are definitely ways to add value, and it's definitely good to, do your own research and make some of your own decisions. But it is not the same as other optimizers out there where like you could set all of your rules, build your lineups, get 30% exposure to a stack, and still not really actually know if that's a good play. If you are getting a stack in your 20 max build or your single entry build or your 150 max build, because of how SaberSim builds lineups, that team is probably a good play, right? Like because we are building these using simulation data and accounting for the important things like correlation and ownership and variance in your builds, right? So we're getting like 50% Cardinal stacks here, right? In this build for tonight's DraftKings slate, right? So that implies that the Cardinals are a profitable stack to play for this particular contest, right? So I think that's actually a good thing to just note, right? That that's why things like test builds and research builds actually work. Those aren't even concepts on other tools out there because that doesn't mean anything. On SaberSim, it does. Now, if you want to go down the weeds, or you want to get into the weeds a little bit, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you actually can basically run builds on SaberSim to figure out exactly how likely a stack is to be the optimal stack, right? And the way that we would do that is running my so-called research builds, right? And what a research build is going to be is I would recommend turning correlation and ownership fade off and turning sim variance to 10, turning min salary to 0, and building 1,500 lineups, right? And in this case, since you said stack, we're going to set a stack rule. So we would go to rules, stacking, and I'm going to research 5 stacks here. So what does this do, right? Because I think I often talk about these on stream. I talk about these research builds. I talk about the value of doing these. And then I'll get a question the next day that says, what is the right ownership fade slider for the research builds again? Or, how many lineups should be in the pool, right? And I think that to me implies that I'm not doing a very good job of kind of actually explaining what's happening here, because I think once you understand really what's happening here, there's only one way you can do this. So what we are doing is we are taking a single game simulation of every game on the slate, right? Sim variance 10. That means every lineup is going to be built using it as the optimal for a single game simulation of every game on the slate, right? And we are doing that for 1,500 slates, for 1,500 sims with no salary requirements, no correlation or ownership impact, and the only restriction on the builder is that there has to be a 5 stack in every lineup. So we are essentially going to sim the slate 1,500 times and ask SaberSim, if you had to build a lineup that included a 5 stack, what would that lineup be? And what we will get out of this is an approximation, essentially an optimal rate of every stack on the slate, every 5 stack on the slate. And this is a very easy way. Now you will need, I know HC had mentioned before, these builds where you're building 1,500 lineups and downloading and looking at your exposures, you do need the advanced plan to do this. So if you're on the starter plan, I would instead focus more on building lineups that are well optimized for your contests that you're playing by using the right sliders for those contests and editing your exposures and hand picking some of your lineups in step 3. So this is something that you need the advanced plan on. But we'll see. I'll show you what this looks like here at the end. And this will actually at least approximate the % chance of a certain team being the optimal 5 stack. And I think it can be a pretty cool way to do this. I actually, I prefer this method as opposed to, as people have asked before, why don't you just put this out there, right? I like that even me as a SaberSim user has the ability to go in and run this anytime I want with any set of projections I want and so on, right? So you can see here, what are the most likely to be optimal 5 stacks? This is what SaberSim believes at the moment, right? Coors Field today. So Washington and Coors at the top, but only a 10% chance for each of them. Then a pretty big jump. And I like to I do this by looking kind of more at tiers, right? So you can kind of see tier 1 is the Coors Field game. There's kind of a tier 2 here of Tampa Bay, Boston, and Houston. And then kind of this tier 3 of the Brewers, the Angels, Tigers, Giants, and then it kind of starts to melt together here. That's crazy that the Dodgers. Oh, Rodon's pitching tonight, right? This is such an interesting spot tonight. It's obvious that SaberSim is pretty bullish on Rodon, right? I guess not even really that much. That's interesting. See, this is why this is fun. This research build is basically saying that Rodon and the Dodgers are probably both a fade tonight. It might be a pricing thing because Rodon's really expensive and the Dodgers are always expensive. But that is an interesting one. But anyway, so. But. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, Neil said Rodon versus the Dodgers. What an awesome spot. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what's funny is that this research build, at least at this particular point in the day, is basically saying fade both, which I find really interesting. The research build would kind of imply that Urias is an interesting leverage play as the 4th most likely to be optimal pitcher and the only one that appears to be owned less than his optimal rate. Makes for an interesting spot there. So. Yeah, I don't know. Should be a fun slate. Tuesday slates on baseball season are always fun. So, but anyway, Eagles. Hopefully that helps. So again, to summarize here, right? Because I don't want to leave you confused and have overcomplicated this here. So remember that if you're building lineups and using the default settings for the contest that you're playing, you are going to get good lineups, right? So if you a good way, let me actually flip this on its head. Let's say you're playing a single lineup and you've decided, I want to play this stack, right? A very good way to learn, is that a good play? Or is that like one of the more viable plays on the slate, is to just build a big pool of single entry lineups and see if you are getting exposure to that team, right? Because if you are, you are in agreement, at least with SaberSim. It doesn't mean you have to be in agreement with SaberSim. It doesn't mean you can't play that team regardless. But if you want to use the tools to say, is this a good lineup for this contest or a good stack for this contest, build lineups for that contest and see. But if you want to quantify the exact percent chance of a stack being the optimal stack, you can take advantage of those research builds that way. And you will find that basically every team on every slate forever is viable, is at least the case for baseball, right? So, but let's wrap this up. I'll show this last thing here, and then we'll move on. So, for example, right, one thing you can do here is look and see what is every team I got stack exposure to on this build of 500 lineups for a single entry, right? Well, you can see there's a lot of different ways to go, but if your favorite stack on the entire slate was San Francisco, right? Well, maybe try one of these stacks instead. So anyway, cool. Let's keep it going. Nikhil said MLB ownership projections on DraftKings have been great so far. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I've actually heard that a couple times recently this week here. So happy to hear that. You guys have Eric on SaberSim Eric to thank for that. We've made some improvements to the ownership model to start this season, and there are more being worked on behind the scenes that we're hoping to get out in the near future as well. So, okay, let's keep it going here. Okay. Let's see. Catching up on Slack here. Neil said, Jordan, I've taken your advice and prioritized the four-seamer over the mini-max and have been having some success with it. Only problem now is I have to deal with the sharks like giant squid. Yeah, I saw you up there last night, especially I think early on. Had something going there. So, yeah, I've been playing. I've been also, I mean, you can see my entries file here for tonight. I have been like religiously using my spreadsheet that I made on our YouTube channel here. So I have... I made this video, right? 4 simple rules to build your MLB DFS bankroll. And in there, I attached a Google Sheets spreadsheet that basically, if you put in the contests for that day, it will tell you what contests to play, at least in line with our other contest selection principles. And I have also been following that. It is at times for me as an MME guy at my core, it is difficult sometimes to say that instead of playing 150 lineups in the 50-cent minimax, that I'm going to play 20 lineups in the $4, just because I've always liked playing as many lineups as possible. But I really do think from an EV standpoint, it is a better contest to play. So that's what I've been prioritizing as well. But all right, let's keep it going. Keep it going. What do we got? Brad says, NBA Showdown question. Are you playing them all? First of all, but is there a set number of captains you try to ride, or basically just stick what SaberSims gives you? During the regular season, I was playing every NBA Showdown, every single slate. I have stopped. I'm basically now just playing the main slate. Honestly, it's probably a little backwards because now that we're in the playoffs, the Showdowns actually have better contests or like more effective entrants. But since baseball has started, I haven't had as much time to play every NBA Showdown, even though there's less of them and they're better contests. I probably should be, but I haven't been playing the NBA Showdowns as much. If I was, and during the regular season, I don't typically select a certain number of captains. Sometimes it's one, like if the Mavs are on the Showdown, right? A lot of times you just get 100% Luka captain, or sometimes with the Nuggets, 100%, like any of those guys that just have a hugely high median projection or mean projection. A lot of times you'll just get a couple of them. For teams that score a little bit more spread out, sometimes you'll get a lot of different exposure to different captains. So honestly, for me, and I've talked about this before, the NBA Showdowns are mostly about diversifying on that slate and reducing my risk and getting more lineups in play. And there's only so much time you have, right? I have more time to commit to a main slate process than I do for every individual NBA Showdown. So my NBA Showdown process legitimately during the NBA season was completely push build, like push button print money, just build. I didn't think about who my exposure to my captains were. I didn't think who my exposures, I didn't do anything. right? And you can do that kind of stuff, right? I've talked a little bit here on stream. I have a whole video about NBA Showdown strategy, about like basically this video here. You don't have to be a pro to beat NBA Showdowns, is like an hour long of basically here's what I would do if I had infinite time for every NBA Showdown, or if I was really trying to maximize my results on NBA Showdown. But the reality was I didn't. And I think you're getting 80% of the value by just building and running what you have. So, like with that said, I think you can diversify. I think the captain is the highest leveraged part of any showdown lineup. So diversifying and intentionally trying to like exploit ownership or get more unique at the captain position, I think is great. If you are not comfortable with the amount of risk associated with 100% Luka captain, for example, then diversify that way. But for me personally, I wasn't, because I just didn't have time to late swap all of my main slate lineups and to do the showdown lineups and all of that all at once. So I was just keeping what I was getting and feeling pretty confident with that. I was pretty successful in those. So I actually maybe should come back to NBA Showdown and play a little bit here. I probably will as we get a little bit further into the playoffs. Definitely by the conference finals and the NBA. I'll play NBA finals DFS. Probably the conference finals too. I think this is, I think, the last round that they have typical 2-game main slates, right? After this round, I think they don't ever play 2 games the same night. So it will either be the Western Conference Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals. So once the showdowns basically become the main slates, I'll probably start playing them again. But for now, I've just been enjoying not having so much DFS to do throughout the evening. Like I set everything at lock for both sports and make sure that there's no super surprise news for the NBA 1 late swap. And sometimes I go outside, which is nice. I get some fresh air. I haven't had fresh air since October, so always nice. But Brad says, also, do you have any tips for NASCAR? I haven't had a profitable week yet in NASCAR, and I'm not sure where I can add that much value. Yeah, so good question. So I do have some tips, but I will qualify this by saying, like, I am very green to NASCAR. I'm watching my first races this year, and I'm kind of just sitting there like wide-eyed. Like, I think it's awesome. I think it's super fun to watch. I don't know why I haven't gotten into it before, to be honest. But I don't have a lot of ways to tell you how to add value from like a research standpoint at the moment. I will tell you this, broadly speaking, when you enter a new sport, start playing a new sport for the first time, I think a couple things. One, scale your roll down, right? I'm playing like 1% bankroll in NASCAR for the same reason. I'm having fun with it. We got sims up. I believe in the sims. I don't know a lot of the best ways to add value. And I'm kind of just rocking with what I'm getting. And I've scaled my bankroll down to 1% so that it can just be kind of a learning experience, right? Matching your investment, right? Treating your bankroll like a business, like your capital, and matching your investment to your level of confidence of the edge you have is a good idea, right? That 5% is always the maximum. So do that. Second, racing sports, especially NASCAR, is already pretty high variance, right? And I think you can diversify even further, which will make the week-to-week swings a little less painful if you are finding that you are swinging really hard, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with capping your maximum exposure to 50 or 60% or something like that, just so you are not completely sunk if like one of the cars blows up or there's a wreck or something like that, right? In a 20 max, we're a little bit more diversified than that. You'll find that these pools of lineups that you get in NASCAR are really, really diverse and very flexible to these kinds of changes. So I have been playing in a way that's pretty diversified. I'm probably due for a rewatch of this video too, but I did interview Kingfish NATO, Dan from the SaberSim community at the start of right before Daytona. And he does know what he's talking about when it comes to NASCAR. This video is an hour long, and I was furiously trying to take notes and remember everything the entire time. So I would go watch this video and I probably should too, to jog my memory of some of the things we talked about there. And I would also say, he and other sharper NASCAR players are in the SaberSim Slack. So don't be afraid, on Sunday morning before building your NASCAR lineups before the Cup race. Ask some questions. fire away. So. Patrick said, when late swapping, what is the optimal build option when you have several entries from satellite, single entry, 3 entry, etc.? Yeah, good question. What I typically do, so let me actually say this first. For baseball, I have been leaning more heavily on quick swap personally. So what I have been doing is, like the other night, Matt Duffy for the Angels got ruled out. So what I've actually been doing is like, I'll go into the team. So like, okay, Ohtani's actually a decent example. And I'll go look and I'll look at the batters. And like, let's say Ohtani is in the lineup and then gets scratched and you need to swap out. I'll basically look and like the first thing I'll actually try to do, let's say is I will use quick swap to manually swap to specific player swap Ohtani and try to swap him to Trout, Ward, Marsh, and Walsh. Probably since he's first base and outfield eligible first, to try to keep like that lineup the same and just put in the other guy. That's what I've been doing most of the time for baseball this season. For basketball and just more generally speaking, when it comes to what are the best settings to use for your late swap, I typically, the way I look at it is I will just pick a set of sliders that typically it's the 20 max 10 to 50K. And I will just pick a set of sliders that's roughly a good midpoint of all of the contests I'm playing, or kind of a good default value, and swap there. And what I am basically saying is that the convenience of being able to do this all in one build, combined with the shorter amount of time it takes to do that, and along with the fact that half the field doesn't even, or not even half the field, a lot of the field doesn't even take the time to late swap anyway, I'm willing to sacrifice the fact that technically I'm not perfectly late swapping the optimal sliders for my single entry contest, for example. Right, I'm swapping as best I can there. So if you want to late swap, what I would do is I would pick something like the 20, 10 to 50K as a good baseline, depending on what contest you're playing. I would also turn this toggle on. Only swap lineups containing out players. I don't think there are many situations in baseball where you need to rebuild every lineup because of news. You typically only need to rebuild the lineups where players are out. So if you turn that toggle on, it will only swap lineups where players are out, which is very convenient. So, but A Lake said, when playing MLB Showdown, do you try to stack both pitchers or just one? Good question. I would say it's going to depend a lot on the slate, but playing both pitchers is very likely to be a pretty heavily duplicated lineup. It is going to depend on the slate, right? Like, actually, this one's a good example, right? Rodon versus Urias, which it looks like SaberSim kind of likes both of these guys. They're both the highest projected players by a mile. You're likely to get both of these guys in some lineups. I don't know when I haven't been playing too much MLB Showdown this season so far. I played a ton last year. I never really made too much of an effort to specifically avoid that construction. I would basically say, a couple things. One, the contests are generally small enough that your risk of being duplicated is not that high, and you're not likely to be exceptionally duplicated unless you're building like a max salary, both pitchers and no relief pitchers lineup or something like that, where then maybe you can get duplicated more. Yeah, trying to think here. I don't know. Now that I'm thinking this in my head, I probably would still probably try to avoid playing both pitchers. It is going to be really slate dependent. And like, if you're building lineups for a particular slate and you're getting a ton of them, it might just be better to just play both pitchers and basically hope that even if the lineup gets duped, that its probability, basically that the probability of that being the optimal lineup far outweighs the percent chance that any other player dupes that lineup, right? But I would in general prefer to just have one pitcher. That is in general what I would prefer. So, yeah, kind of. I feel like a little bit. I feel like a little bit in between there. I think if you're playing on regular season, I think I'll answer this the same way I did earlier. On regular season baseball showdown, where, if you're playing today and you're playing all 6 of these showdowns and playing the main slates and some of these other slates, right? If it were me, I think it would be a little bit too time intensive to go in and make sure. Actually, you know what? Now though, would it be easy to just create a group rule? Oh man, now it's so easy. I forgot we added groups this season. It would be so easy to do this now. And this is new. Let me see if this actually works. I wonder if this works well for captain and flex, but I think it does. We'll see. Oh, actually, no, it doesn't. I think we have to add them both. You have to do... Sorry, I am rambling here. Let me try to get my thoughts together. What I'm trying to see is if we could just very easily create a group to group together the pitchers so that we wouldn't have to spend a lot of time worrying about this. I think there's like 2 Rodons, right? Yeah, there are. So it does get a little tricky because we have the captains. I guess basically you could still just put all of these guys together and say less than or equal to 1 still. So you could do that, and that would work. I think that's an interesting idea, to be honest. Especially, I guess, okay, so here's kind of the core point. If you're playing every showdown, and most of these baseball showdowns are pretty small fields, not very big prize pools, I think your risk of being duplicated is generally pretty low because you're only talking about 1,000 other lineups or something like that. I don't know if I would do this on a nightly basis for every single showdown. But when you're playing bigger showdown contests, like in the playoffs, like World Series showdown gets pretty big. They always play one game. The return from the All-Star break is always like one game that has a pretty big prize pool. That would be an interesting way as well of setting this rule. I think my gut is telling me that this is probably a good strategy. This probably is pretty sharp to do this, but it may be very, only very slightly positive EV on a small slate, on a small contest. So anyway, let me know if that helps. I feel like I was all over the place answering that question, partly because I was trying to answer the question of should you do it and what's the best way to do it at the same time. Trying to get all my thoughts together there. I think it's a good idea. And I think using that group rule is a very simple way of doing that quickly without painfully having to go through and kind of pick your individual lineups in step 3. Just make sure you include the captain version and the utility version of each player and say less than or equal to 1 of all 4. And that should work. So Brad said, through the season, I had decent luck with showdowns. I just get nervous with the new series starting and rotations are uncertain. This looks like this is back to the NBA showdown thing. Yes. I think it's just wise, like for the playoffs in general, if you're not going to spend time like doing research to make sure you're on top of those rotations, then you should scale down a little bit because they get a little less predictable. So, but Jason said, I have a quick question if you could answer it. Every time I optimize a lineup, the lineup constantly changes when I run it again. How can I get the best optimized lineup for multipliers? Good question. That will always happen. That will happen provided that your lineup is that will happen anytime your sim variance slider is anything more than 0. And the reason why is because SaberSim has a very different approach to the way that we optimize lineups compared to other optimizers out there. So we start by simulating every game on the slate play by play thousands of times, right? So while we have a player's projection, right, their average projection, that is basically just a way of boiling down what their true range of outcomes is into a single number, right? And when you build your lineups, we will build each lineup by taking a random sample of sims and using the projections that player scored in that set of sims for that lineup. So if you just sat here and built lineups over and over and over and over again on SaberSim, you will get a different set every single time, most likely. You will get some similar lineups and probably a similar overall strategic direction, but your lineup will change every time. And we believe that is the correct way, right? There are trillions, literally trillions of possible lineups for a given slate, and players have extremely wide ranges of outcomes. And there is a lot of natural variance. The variance in the lineups you are getting when you build lineups with SaberSim mimics the variance of the game that's being played. Any tool out there that gives you the any tool out there that gives you the same lineup every single time you build, I think is significantly overvaluing how the expected value of that actual lineup. With that said, if you basically just want our cash optimal, if you just say, great, I get it, I understand, but I want to optimize the highest projected average points possible, you can do that. And you would do that by clicking style cash, and you'll see that's going to turn the correlation, ownership fade, and variance off, right? And basically just build you the highest projected lineups possible. And these, if you were to run repeated cash builds, you will get the same lineup every single time. Since you mentioned multipliers, it gets a little interesting. I would say if you're playing like triple ups, or maybe if you're playing triple ups, I would probably just play cash lineups, right? Because the lineups that have the highest percent chance of finishing in the top 50th percentile, and lineups that have the highest percent chance of finishing in the top 33rd percentile, like you need for triple ups, I think are close enough that the optimal strategy, I think, for triple ups is probably just to play cash lineups, personally. So I would just build a cash lineup. If you are building for quintuple ups or 10x or 40x boosters, I would actually highly recommend building with our GPP settings and adjusting the entry limit and entrance to whatever is correct for that contest. So maybe it's a single entry that is 500 people, and living with a little bit of variance on a lineup to lineup basis, because that variance also allows you to get a unique and differentiated lineup and embrace the natural variance of the game a little bit more than people out there that are trying to use cash lineups in those contests. So again, to sum up here, the reason why you get different lineups each time when you build with SaberSim, when your sim variance is anything but 0, is because we're randomly sampling our sims. If you want the cash lineup, or if you want to optimize for highest projected points, you can set your style to cash. And for your multipliers, I would vary based on what contest I was playing. If I was playing triple ups, I would use probably cash. But if I was playing any of those boosters, I would use some of the higher sliders here. So Dawn says, do you use the groups in MLB DFS? I don't really. I think what we just talked about before with grouping the starting pitchers together in Showdown is an interesting idea as a way to avoid duplication, right? I don't know if it's necessary with the size of baseball lineups, but I think it's interesting, or the size of baseball Showdown contests, but I think it's interesting. For main slates and classic slates, I don't. I don't use groups. I don't really know. I would love to hear from somebody that is using groups actively what you're doing, but I don't know what the point of it would be. I don't think there's a super good reason to use it. I do use the stack rules. There are times where, and especially this season, where scoring has kind of been down, and it's early in the season anyway. It's early season and the ball is kind of dead. And I think those 3-3s and 3-3-2s and 3-2-2s look a little bit more attractive, but I generally want a 4-2 plus in all of my lineups. So at least a 4 stack and at least a 2 stack, and higher than that is great. So I have been setting typically this combination of rules for most main slates. And then I will be willing to play anything 4-2, 4-2-2, 4-3, 5-3, 5-2, and so on. I've been generally okay with those stacks, and I've been setting those rules, but I haven't been using the groups very much. So Jason said, thanks for answering my question. You got it. You got it. Eagles asks an interesting question here as we begin to wrap it up here. Brad said, oh, Jordan, you said it. Did MLB kill the balls this year? I think so. It kind of seems like it. I don't know. I don't think this is known. Like, unless I missed something in the news, I don't think this is known. But I mean, based on Neil says, yes, they've killed the balls this year. Yeah. So, I mean, the data the data indicates like statistically the ball passes the null hypothesis, right? Like the hitting performance so far this year is statistically I can't even remember how to describe this the right way, right? It's statistically significant, indicating that the ball has been deadened, right? It is extremely statistically unlikely that the hitting performance could be this low as it is without the ball being deadened. But I don't think the MLB has come out and said that they did this yet. So kind of nitpicking there, but kind of interesting here. So, and that is something that we have factored into our sims. So that is worth noting. We are factoring in a deadened ball here. So, okay, anyway, let's get back to this. How can I find out if my MMA lineup is being duplicated on DK? It's kind of tough. So I actually think that is one of the biggest holes on SaberSim at the moment, is that we don't have really a good way to check on dupes. That is something that is on our roadmap. So sneak peek, very excited about that for things like MMA, NFL Showdown, to a lesser extent, golf, NASCAR, Formula One would be a good one too. Any sports where duplication is a big risk. We are looking into ways to add that in, and in basically kind of work to add in a way to calculate like expected dupes on a per contest basis and then filter out by different things like that. So super excited about that. I think some of you guys watching along here are probably going to be pretty excited to hear that. So I'm very excited about that. At the moment, there's not a super easy way to do that. What I think you can do, but it requires a little Excel wizardry again, is if you download your lineups, right? MMA is a really good case study for this. But what you can do is you can download your lineups and then calculate the ownership product of a lineup, right? That will basically be the ownership projection as a decimal, right? For each fighter multiplied together. And then if you multiply that by the number of people in your contest, that will very, very roughly approximate the number of expected instances of that lineup in your contest, right? The number of dupes. Not even really the number of dupes. The number of expected instances of that lineup in the contest. And the reason that works is it's basically just probability, right? You are saying that the percent chance that any one fighter is in any lineup is independent from any other fighter being in that lineup, which is a decent approximation for MMA. And you can do that and come up with that calculation for yourself. It's a rough calculation. It's very rough, but it works. So I guess I think you specifically said in the app, in your question. There's not a good way in the SaberSim app to figure out exactly how likely your lineup is to be duplicated, unfortunately, at the moment. But you can do that calculating it yourself. And we are going to add a dupe calculator in the future, which we're pretty excited about. So, Patrick said, why are there no projections for LPGA, KFT golf, or college basketball win in season? The golf ones are interesting. So actually, really what this mostly comes down to is we haven't had time to build models out for them and build simulations for them. College basketball is firmly on the roadmap for us. So I would actually say, I think it is our soft goal to have full simulation support for college basketball by the start of next season. The LPGA and KFT golf, maybe in the future. I think what would likely come before that is probably an update to our golf model period for the PGA Tour. And then maybe we can look if there was interest in LPGA and KFT to expand to some of those other tours. We ultimately, like, the sports for us get attention and get updates and things like that in about the same ratio to what their contest sizing looks like on the sites, and then also the interest of our community. So it's great if you are interested in these other golf tours and college basketball. It's always good to hear that. I know college basketball is popular, so that's one we're definitely going to add. But if you're interested in these alternative tours for golf, that's great for us to hear that, because then it lets me know at least that we have people that would play it if we had support for it. But they are definitely probably lower on the priority list for us to get spun up compared to some of the other sports out there. So. Ryan, I saw your message in Slack. Any Counter-Strike strategy sessions coming in the coming months? Great DFS sport. Maybe I'll talk to Will and see if he wants to come back on soon and chat with me a little bit about Counter-Strike. So I'll hit him up. But all right, cool. Let's see what else we got. Edward chimed in on the group's conversation. And he said, I'm a little behind the live, but I'm using groups recently to limit what I consider to be bad hitting teams to a max of 2 batters. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's a good idea. I think you can do that I think that's a good idea. And you can do that with the stacking rules too, right? Like no more than 2 players from whatever the teams are. Yeah, that's fine. Especially as a stacking rule. I love the bad teams. The bad hitting teams are the teams I want to 5-stack. But that's just because I'm a little chaotic with my baseball lineups. So no, it's not entirely true. I think I used to play a lot more aggressively, exploitatively in baseball. Like I really, especially when I first got my start playing baseball DFS, I played a lot fewer lineups. It would be like 5 lineups, every single entry from I would play every single entry from the $1 to the $10 or the $25. And I'd do a lot of hand building. I'd build my first lineup, put it in the 25. I'd build my second lineup, put it in the 10 and things like that. And I would do some crazy stuff back then. It's not that crazy. I don't know. Stacking the lowest run total team is not like an unheard of thing. We're stacking against the chalkiest pitcher, but I did a lot more of that then. I think my approach now with playing so many lineups is a little bit more balanced out. Still have that exploitative edge, but I really used to embrace those vomit stacks, as they are so called. But anyway. All right, we'll go ahead. We'll wrap it up there. I don't see any other questions coming in here. Been a fun stream today. Talked about all kinds of stuff. A lot of focus on, well, maybe not a lot of focus on, but definitely a healthy focus on the research builds. Got to do some demos of some of the things that I do in Excel outside of SaberSim, which was pretty cool here today. We had an interesting conversation about Baseball Showdown, which I haven't talked too much about that strategically so far this season. So that was good. All kinds of different stuff. So it was a good stream. If this was your first time watching me here, or if you otherwise aren't already subscribed to SaberSim, come check us out. SaberSim.com, free 7-day trial. No strings attached, right? You can come check us out here. Oh God, now I'm laughing. HC said you live a dangerous life, Jordan. I realized that's how I was coming across as I was saying that. I was like, man, you guys, back in the day, back when I was young, you guys would never believe what I used to do. I would 5-stack that's not how I was trying to sound, but I realized that's how I was sounding as I was going. So yeah, Mr. Dangerous here. Mr. Crazy here. You never know what he's going to do next. He'll stack any team he wants. But anyway, SaberSim.com, free trial. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already. Get notifications every time we go live. We'll be right back here. I'm cracking up now. Right back here again tomorrow on Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern for another stream. So last note for those of you guys that have stuck around for this entire stream, right? Podcast is coming very soon. Sent along the official word to our podcast host today that we're ready to go live. So I think basically just waiting on them to push it all out to our different feeds. But I think our goal here, at least by the end of the week, is to have the podcast up. So it will have like the last week of office hours videos. If you've missed any of those and want to listen to an audio version of those will be up. And it'll have like our most recent 8 or so well, maybe less than that, 7 or 8 strategy session type videos, the streams, if you missed any of those and want to catch the audio versions of those as well. And I think it's going out to Spotify, Apple, and Google. I don't know what Google's podcast platform is, but should be up like this week. So look forward to that. And we will we'll get that up and do that. So anyway, I'm going to hop off. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Take care. See ya.